Hello, in today's video I will be discussing how to draw hair. Hair is something that a lot of people can struggle with, but I think if you break it down, it can be quite simple, and I will demonstrate the way I do it. Now, do keep in mind I'm no professional at this, still very much learning just like everyone else, but I figured I could be of use. So to start with, I have this illustration of a female Charles Xavier, because I mean, you know how it is. So first off, the crown. Essentially, you want to figure out on your character's head where the source of the hair will be, because that's where it all essentially grows out from. So on my character over here, I put a little red dot with accompanying red lines to show where the crown is and where the hair would grow out from, and then and just sort of give a general shape of how it would grow out. Once you figure out where the crown is and the direction of all the hair, you can start creating, I guess, more like clumps, just like these broader shapes that extend out of that one point. So for my character, she has more bangs. She has like these curtains almost, and with that, I'm able to figure out how this hair would lay on her bald scalp. As we continue on, you can add little flourishes depending on the type of style you're going with. So mine is very much anime-esque, so it's got a bit more of a bombastic, a bit more energetic hairstyle with like these large strands that sort of poke out, hair that sort of droops and hangs in a very almost like spaghetti or noodle-like fashion. As you can see with the way it dangles on her shoulders and on her arm. Keep extending it, just visualize how they would sort of flow down. Give it a nice direction for everything. You can have the hair sort of go everywhere, but that's more of an intentional stylistic choice if you're going for a certain energy for your piece. But for the most part, most people kind of want to keep the hair in a certain flow. After you sketch out how the hair sits on the head from that certain point, you can do the clean line art as seen here. Once you have your clean line art, now it's time to get into the flats. Pick whatever color that you're going for. I'm going for a sort of pinkish, peachish hue for her hair. And in any given drawing software, mine is Clip Studio. So if you're using Clip Studio, you can follow along a bit better. But this applies to pretty much any drawing software. Just start filling it in whichever way that you like to do. Some people like to use the paint bucket. Some people like to use the lasso tool, magnetic lasso, so on and so forth. Just color in the hair as a flat on one layer. I decided to change the color to more of a purplish maroonish hue now. So now let's get into the rendering, primarily how you would shade the hair. So you want to identify the direction of your light source. On my piece, it's sort of coming from her left side, from our perspective, the right, downwards onto her. Something that I like to do is I like to visualize the hair as if it is a ball. So imagine you are shading a sphere. When you're shading a sphere and you apply that to the hair itself, it becomes a lot clearer as to how the hair should be shaded in a more general sense. As you can see here, the shaded side is towards the left and downwards, whilst the light is shining on the top right, and it has a nice soft rounded gradient near the top right part of her hair. Then you want to apply a sort of a bounce light, reflections, so on and so forth, in order to give it a bit more depth, a bit more, just that pizzazz to the rendering. And then you want to get into the more stark, darker shading parts. So as you can see here, I'm filling in parts that would be most blocked from the light with a much darker shade of color that I'm going for. And like I said, consider all the hair clumps as if they are sort of a flat noodle, and you'll be able to more easily visualize how the shadows are casted from those clumps of hair. As we keep on going, you can see that I'm continuing to shade the parts that are, for example, closest to her body on like away from pretty much all possible light source hitting, there being shaded the darkest. And then obviously do vary it up a little. I don't want it to look too flat, so I add some variance to the darker parts. Some parts will have light bounce off of other parts and light up certain areas. So not everything is just going to be this stark black look. As you can see, I am varying up the shading in order to give it more of a, just to give it more depth. Next up, you want to start adding some slight highlights, not the very bright ones, but sort of ones that go around the edges or places where you could realistically see the light shining or reflecting in a way that would give it more of a realistic look, a bit more depth to it. So for example, you can see that I'm adding a slight shine towards the top of her hair in order to create that sense of depth. Next up is the highlights. What I like to do is I create a new layer and then I clip it to the layer below, the layer below being the general hair rendering. And I just pick a much brighter color. I visualize a ring around her head, but obviously we're only seeing the front of it. And then I just sort of very roughly highlight across that curve. And then I use my specific blending brush, I'll put it up on the screen right now, in order to, you know, sort of blend it with the hair underneath a bit more elegantly. Next up, some more bounce lighting. This just, once again, adds more depth to it, creates a nice effect. Usually I like to create use like a bluish tinge on certain areas. Even if you have a backgroundless image, it gives the illusion of like the environment having an impact on your character, as if your character exists within a space, having some sort of bounce light from the surroundings. I always like to use blue because blue is just something that typically works in this scenario. But if you have a more warm scene, for example, you might want to use an orange or a yellow or a red as an example. Next up, what I like to do is sort of as one of the final steps in your initial lineup. You're not really going to be meticulously drawing every single hair strand. It's not very effective. It becomes quite difficult to manage. So what I like to do is towards the end, after I feel like I've rendered like 90% of the way, I will start adding sort of loose hair strands on a completely separate layer above every other layer above the liner, above the rendering, so on and so forth. And these are just thin hair strands that sort of stick out, and it gives like, it makes the hair look just slightly more loose and wild and like a bit more dynamic. So as you can see here, I will sort of color pick and then select a thinner brush and sort of just go over and add like loose hair strands. It's especially effective for brighter hair strands, because obviously the fact that they're very thin hair strands, it means any light that hits them, they are reflecting that light and letting that light pass through. And this quick part, I'm just sort of doing some quick rendering on like for the rest of the character, just so that you can see how maybe a final image would look after everything's done. Obviously, I did not spend anywhere near as much time on the skin rendering or the clothes rendering, but hey, that's how it is. But when you have rendered everything, something that I like to do, and this is more Clip Studio specific, so I can't, this isn't something that might work as well in something like Procreate, but if you are using Clip Studio, what I like to do is I will sometimes do these final, I guess, post-processing in order to give it that final little bit of flair to the piece. Usually this comes in the form of applying a gradient to the hair on like a layer above or as a correction layer. And you can just mess around with different gradients and see how, when you change the blending mode, how it may affect. So for example, I used this black and white gradient and I shifted it a little, give it a more stark contrast between the highlights and the shadows. Changing the blending mode to brightness, you can see the sort of effect it has. Or, you can mess around with the colors. As you can see, I got this like more rainbowish gradient. When you lower the opacity, erase certain parts, you might be able to get a more, it's like a very stylistic blend of colors that has a bit more of a hazy look to it. Less stark, but a bit more almost like dreamlike in a sense. But those are just like some final little tidbits that I would like to just add at the end of this as just something for you guys to chew on and consider when you're rendering the hair. But as the final piece, here it is. It's not my best. It's far from, I would say, an exemplary piece of work, but it gives you a general idea of the core methods that I use when I render hair. Hopefully this is somewhat helpful for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, if you like these tutorials, please do let me know. And if you made it this far in the video, just comment maroon, just so that I know. I'll give you a nice big thumbs up. Thank you so much once again. Take care.